Welcome to Film Phreeks. This is Justin Llewellyn.
And Eddie Williams.
And tonight we're going to be doing a special review of the latest Disney film that has come out, which is Christopher Robin, which is directed by Mark Forster and stars Ewan McGregor, Haley Atwell, and featuring the voices of Jim Cummings and Brad Garrett. And as you know, this is, for those of you who are familiar, this is based on A.A. Milne and E.H. Shepard's book Winnie the Pooh from the classic era when Winnie the Pooh was popular. And this is basically a continuation of the Winnie the Pooh franchise by having an older Christopher Robin who grows up and leaves his legacy behind of his friends, Winnie the Pooh, Tigger, and all them behind, and he's now an adult. And then basically, this is kind of very straightforward because you've seen from the trailers. He ends up discovering that his friends discover a way outside of their fantasy world and coming into the real world. And then Christopher Robin ends up going back to the fantasy world to try to reconcile with them. And I'm going to leave it there because I really don't want to go into other detail. But basically, if you've seen movies like Hook or Return to Oz and things like that, it's kind of a similar story where you have
it's basically the same similar story where you get the childhood like kind of grow out of you. You went and moved on with your life, had a family, had a job, pretty much, and then you tried to find your inner self again, going back to remembering what you used to do.
Yeah. And now here's some backstory for you. Now, growing up, I was always a Winnie the Pooh fan growing up because Winnie the Pooh was always one of those characters that every time I watched him on like TV and stuff, I just always got a kick out of this lovable guy. And the show that really captured to me, I think, the most was the show that came out in the late 80s called The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh that got me into a lot of the character. And I
think we all, for the most part, got into that one. I think that was considered more of a go-to for anybody from the 70s on up. Not really, because it was a different approach. It was more kid-friendly compared to what the original was about.
Yeah, there were various other Winnie the Pooh like movies that came out before, but I haven't really seen much of those. But there were there were different incarnations that I grew up watching, but the one particular I remember the most was that show. And so
yeah, me on the Winnie the Poohs, I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't necessarily call me a fan, but I remember when I was little watching them. But basically, it's just one of those things that everybody knows, even though I haven't seen a Winnie the Pooh anything in probably like fucking 20 years.
Yeah. And to this one, it really got me curious because I liked this kind of approach they're doing where they're actually taking more the story of the kid from the Winnie the Pooh franchise, Christopher Robin, by doing more of a kind of dramatic but also very warm-hearted kind of version of him growing up and going back to reconcile his past, which I got really anxious about.
And just a quick talk. This is not to be mistaken from the last year's Christopher Robin, where we had something similar with the same name title, but it was actually about the author who wrote it.
Yeah, there was a film that came out last year called Goodbye, Christopher Robin, which was about the original guy, Alan Alexander Milne, who created the story of Winnie the Pooh and all that. So this has nothing to do with that.
It's funny because I didn't even notice it until people told me. When I saw the trailer to this Christopher Robin, I didn't even think nothing of it. I was like, because I remember seeing the trailer to Goodbye Christopher Robin last year, and I actually was like, I never thought I didn't know they pushed the movie off a year.
Yeah, right.
And people were like, no, that's not the same one. That one, because Goodbye Christopher Robin actually came and went in like 2 days. It was gone and no one talks about it anymore. I don't know what happened to it.
Yeah. So that's one that I would probably check out out of curiosity, though. But anyway, going back to this movie, the Disney's Christopher Robin. Upon seeing the film, I can say that I actually enjoyed this film, but there are the little bit of flaws that we'll both kind of get into later. But to get my pros,
as far as I thought it was a heartwarming film, but like you said, we'll get in our cons that really I find to kind of hurt the film majorly on some things, but it still was a heartwarming film. It was okay, but I felt like there were some things that played a major part in kind of ruining some of the experience I saw.
Yeah. Well, to get in, yeah, we'll get to that here later on. But to get into some of my pros, I can say Ewan McGregor, I think, was perfectly cast in the role as Christopher Robin. I think that
I thought he was perfect.
I thought he did an outstanding job capturing a lot of the the emotional integrity of him, playing as an older guy, and also having that childlike nature going back to his past and everything like that. And I thought him in his scenes with Winnie the Pooh really have some of the most magic moments for me. Like their scenes together.
Do. The feeling and the emotion and the heartwarming of them two together mainly was probably one of the strongest points, the best part of this movie.
Yeah, and I think that he really carried this on his own. And I even like the other woman, Haley Atwell, who plays McGregor's wife. And if you remember her, she actually played Peggy Carter from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So
I knew I noticed her from somewhere.
Yeah, she played Peggy from the Captain America films.
Yeah, the first Avenger. Yeah.
Yeah, and she was.
Everybody's performance was really spot on this film. I thought the voiceovers, even some of them that sadly have been passed away from the old version, so they were able to get some new voice. I believe they got some new voices.
I think they replaced. They've had different voices over the years, but the one that's been playing the most over the years is Jim Cummings, who's played him. Yeah. Who's played not only Pooh but also Tigger over the last couple decades. So
it was pretty good that they were able to kind of stay consistent then on keeping, for the most part, some of the voices. And I thought everything was everybody was pretty spot on. And another pro I like to mention, I really enjoyed, probably another thing that really captures the authentic of Winnie the Pooh, was I do like how they went with a more stuffed animal-like look to him.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, for a long time, I always kind of wondered what Winnie the Pooh would look like live action. And to me, this is probably the best way that they could go with that approach, because the film makes it to where they're going with more of that older type look. Because for those of you who don't know, when Winnie the Pooh, way back in the old days, when Winnie the Pooh was first popular, believe it or not, he actually looked like just a regular bear. He didn't look like the colorful type that we seen in different Disney carnations. They were going for more of the old approach that the original author came up with, and so I actually like how they stuck with that.
Yeah, and I'm glad they went with that whole stuffed animal look, because from what, I don't know if this is entirely true, but rumors had it they actually changed it to make it look like that it almost happened at one point it was going to be digital CGI, which I thought would probably ruin the film.
Yeah, they were able to render it well where it is CGI, but it's able enough to where you could still look at it matching with the tone of the film. Because the other big praise I give to that calls back to that is this film really goes with a lot of the emotional side to it. Unlike some of the other incarnations of Winnie the Pooh and everything, since this one was taking more of a more serious route, I kind of like how they made the cinematography very kind of bleak looking, and it was going for more moody type of feel of it. Yeah,
it was going for a more traditional British look to the film, which I thought worked really well. I thought it was pretty neat, and cinematography was really, really good.
Yeah,
I wouldn't expect anything less, because I know these movies, from Disney especially, they're going to be visually pretty.
Yeah, and also the biggest praise, the two other biggest praise I have is the movie grabs you by the heart in a lot of scenes, especially a lot of the stuff where Christopher Robin is having to spend time with his friends and having to basically go back to try to his childlike nature, because you've kind of seen these stories before where you have a guy who ends up leaving his childhood behind. Then he doesn't want to go back to it. He's trying to just focus on his regular life. And then there's that moment where he comes back,
and they seem to always have a job that they put in front of their family.
Yeah,
they always seem to have that important job. Like example, pretty much what one of my I'm like. I thought it was good, but it's not original. They really did a lot of atmosphere. The way that they wrote this story was kind of similar to Hook.
Yeah,
with Robin Williams.
Or even
in that one, Robin Williams forgot that he was Peter Pan. He forgot Neverland and everything. Well, here Christopher Robin, he forgot his childhood life. Friends of Winnie the Pooh and all them. So he went on to create his own life and. Then finally comes later on, and it was like he's trying to reconcile.
Yeah, and I think a lot of those. I think this movie really captured a lot of that emotion for me, because there were actually points where I was almost at the verge of tears, especially when you get some of those moments where he's spending time with his friends and stuff. But the other biggest praise I have,
there's some good emotion parts in this film too.
The other biggest praise I have is The other biggest praise I have as well is there actually are some really funny moments that come around, especially one of the biggest highlights for me is when Eeyore, the donkey, spits out some lines here and there that had me smiling throughout and just made me chuckle here and there that I enjoyed. So the movie does have a good blend of not only some, very emotional parts, but also some good warmth, like cute and cuddly moments that I enjoyed. So, now... if I had to really get into... Now, here's where I kind of get into some of my cons. While I did really enjoy this film, I will say that, to kind of start out with, it is very predictable, and it does seem like it's a film that you've seen countless times in other films before that have done this same approach.
Exactly. The predictability was some of my problems, but let me get to my one that I want to talk to you about the most here, and this is really, to me, I thought... is probably the film's really the biggest problem is the pacing. This film, as much heartwarming this film is, this pacing, you get little, then you got minor, then you have moderate, then you have really, really bad pacing. And I kind of place this in the moderate to almost high pacing problem. This film just drags. And it just drags for the most part, mainly in the first hour. It's just like they're build up him and Pooh, and you get these back and forth motions between both. But then you notice after a while it's been like an hour and they're still doing that.
Yeah,
it's just it just felt like at first it wasn't going anywhere.
Yeah, I could see that, because to me I felt that
And while I'm on that topic, let me also mention that. The director, probably is to blame on this. I feel like this director didn't know how to manage the time in his movie, and while that first hour was so dragging to the point of I almost fell asleep on some parts, then when it got good, like towards that third act, then he rushes really fast through it. It's like no balance in time. It's either it's too slow or it's moving too fast.
Yeah, I could see that. It does. That's one of my cons that I do have with it the most is I felt like the pacing was a bit slow at times for me, especially in the first act, because the parts where it's focusing mainly on Christopher Robin, like in his normal life and stuff, I was feeling a bit bored with that kind of approach because. Well, for one, I kind of knew where the film was leading on to, so I felt like it was dragging along as it went. For me, it didn't really pick up until we got back to when we get to see him interacting with his friends again. That to me is when I felt the movie was starting to really pick back up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you. It definitely did have a pacing problem, but I didn't quite have as a pace problem like say you did. But I will admit the movie did drag quite a bit for it.
Yeah. See, to me, I don't know if it was just me or whatever. I thought it was just me. I went with my girlfriend. She had the same issue too. It's a shame that this film could have been a lot better, but the director's just pacing the way he paced his film and what he was trying, it almost feels like he was losing ideas. He wanted to make this, but at the same time he was looking at what approach he has to go with this to make an actual complete film. And I think because of that, you can kind of see how the story kind of struggles a little bit in the writing. And like we were talking about earlier, it just felt like he got to the point where he just pretty much used stories we've already saw before, like Hook, the Return to Oz was another one. I mean, it feels like it was like that where he just went with that approach because it was the easy way out.
Yeah, I could see.
Like, I actually expected more from this because the film does feel when it was coming out, it was actually going to be a big deal. These type films usually have incredible writing. I didn't, after watching it, it pretty much was a standard writing. It was standard, the story. I mean, it was your just typical beginning, middle, end. It was like, okay. I mean, there was nothing that really stood out.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. It's definitely one of those films that, while I did enjoy it, I do see a lot of the problems that it definitely has. But overall, though, I will say that because I did kind of feel a lot of that warmth and a lot of that, that kind of brought me back to when I was a child again with that nature. I really feel like the film I like just a tad bit than you did. So with that, I'm probably going to give it maybe I'll probably...
Yeah, go ahead.
So with that, I'm going to probably give it maybe I'll go with maybe a warm and low, maybe a low but very warmful, compelling grade on the Film Phreeks meter.
And the thing about this, another complaint, I mean, it really didn't bother me too much on this. The film did get criticized for its marketing, and it didn't know what audience it was trying to appeal to. And what I mean by that is this film is actually trying to appeal the way that the structure and how things are written. This is supposedly supposed to appeal more towards our grandparents when Winnie the Pooh came out way back in the day, way back, and the old days. And it was supposed to appeal like a lot towards that crowd, but at the same time, they were wanting to bring a new generation, like new kids, to like that. There's a problem with that, and the problem is the generation gap between your grandparents and your grandparents, as in my grandparents, and somebody like my kid, which that would be their great-grandparents. You're talking about both. I mean, that's a big gap in generations. The mood, how people are and how kids approach things and how they like things, and the way they see their world, fantasy world, is totally different from older crowd. So when young kids came into this, there were some people under the impression that kids would enjoy this. And I could see why there were so many bored children in my theater, because it really was not strongly for them, mainly for older.
Yeah.
It's a weird, it's not hard to explain. But if I had any other complaints, not really I can think of at this moment. So unfortunately, like I said, it's one of those heartwarming films that I did like, but there's just a couple of things actually almost ruined the film. But it wasn't a bad movie. It was just I just wish the pacing wasn't that atrocious. But anyways, with that said, I'm going to give this film a mid to high average Joe rating on the Film Phreeks meter.
Fair enough. And for those of you who have also seen Christopher Robin and also any of the other incarnations of Winnie the Pooh, let us know in the comments below of what you thought about it. And if you like what you see here, you can feel free to like and subscribe to our channel and check out more of our other reviews here and at our website at filmphreeks.com. And we'll be seeing you in our next review. We'll see you later.
Later.